Hello, Aiste. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Would you like to introduce yourself for the audience?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Alex, for inviting me here. This is brilliant. So I'm Aiste and I teach yoga, and I'm a founder of Footprint Yoga.
Perfect. So you have quite a unique, should we say, job title that I want to dive into. So you call yourself a yoga journey navigator. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how you got into being a yoga journey navigator, please?
Of course. So the reason why I call a yoga journey navigator is because yoga is all about the journey. It's all about the transformation. It's about the journey. So you cannot just start doing exercises and in a way treat it a little bit as an exercise. So there is more to it than just moving your body. There is breath, there is mindfulness, there is so much going on there. And the way I got into yoga was my friend trying to persuade me for 7 years to try yoga. I rejected every single attempt of persuading me to start it and to try it. And then eventually I was going through a bit of a rough patch in my life, a story of pain and grief. My mom passed away, and then I essentially stopped coming up with excuses of not doing it, and finally tried a yoga class. And that was really transformational for me. Even on the first yoga class, I haven't known much about yoga in itself, other than it sounded a little bit weird to start with. All those forms you do, all the foreign language words that I used, all of it sounded like a little bit, alien and so on. But I tried it and it was amazing. So I really felt at the end of the class having almost the only way I can describe it as a blissful experience and a pain-free moment. So for me, that was such a powerful thing to have, that I realized I really will be coming back for more and be spending more time on a mat practicing yoga. So that's how I got into it. But it really was all about having a ton of excuses beforehand, before trying, and overcoming those to finally get to yoga. I think we just all start when we are ready. So it has to be, I guess, a little bit of a process to get there. So yeah, so that's kind of, I think, in a nutshell, where I'm coming from. It just moved from going to the classes and attending them, and eventually realizing I do want to teach. I do want to pass on to others, to really bring that joy of yoga, the joy that I experience when I practice, to other people and share that with the world.
Amazing, amazing. And am I right in understanding you were a technical insurance specialist or something like that?
Yes, so I worked in the catastrophe modeling world, a very joyful subject. It's all about calculating losses from major catastrophes in the world. So it's quite a shift for sure. So it's almost like a yin and yang, kind of like a really sort of like analytical way of looking and thinking about things, and into this more relaxed, chilled world of yoga that I'm transitioning into. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That kind of resonates with me because I have an engineering degree, then did some data analytics, then did some marketing, and then now I coach fat loss. So similar kind of very analytical background, and then getting into what I do. But yeah, so that kind of appreciate part of that journey for sure. So
Wow, that's quite a story as well for you.
Yeah, quite a mixed bag of activities we've both gone through. So, what would you say were some of the key benefits that you experienced? And I think from the sounds of things, it encompassed more than just physical benefits when you started to go through your yoga journey.
Yes, yeah, it really has. So, of course, I think most of the people join yoga by attending a class somewhere, whether it's in the gym, whether it's a sort of more private setting of yoga. So most people do come into it from the aspect of an exercise. This is an exercise, or this is something you do because your GP or somebody else recommended as a stress management tool, which is actually a fairly good recommendation from my point of view, to use yoga as a tool to manage stress. But for me, yoga exercises or asanas, the postures, the forms that you do, which form part of the movement. So this is just one side of it. The other is breath, and focusing and bringing attention to your breath, having that awareness about your breath, and using perhaps breath in many different ways, but one of which is to tune into your body a little bit more and to understand and to become more aware, and use that as well as a link into meditation. So that's another one. So we have movement, we have breath, and we have the meditative side of yoga at the end. So at the end, usually you have shavasana, what's called, you just lie down on the mat, relaxing. This may not necessarily be relaxing, by the way, but that's kind of the intention, is to relax, to let go at that particular moment. A lot of people at that point realize perhaps that their minds are incredibly busy, that there's a lot of going on, and that they cannot relax. So there is a little bit of that. But again, this is just becoming aware of what's going on. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's caused by it. It's more that you become aware. It was there already. You just didn't perhaps realize it was all the busyness in your mind and in your head, that it was there. So I would say these are the main features of yoga that encompass it all. That's where it all starts, all begins.
Amazing, interesting. Yeah, it's so much more than. Well, I noticed you haven't. I don't think you've used the word exercise, or maybe you've used it once, but you've used movement. It's about moving your body as part of it, and then there's the whole mindfulness, breath, inner work kind of element to it as well, which is, I think, a really interesting point to highlight. How do you work with people, with clients, to take them on their yoga journey? How does that look?
Of course. So how do I work? There are actually several ways that I work with people. So one of them is group membership that I have. So it's essentially what it sounds. There is a group of people attending regular sessions a couple times a week usually, that we have. There is also the support ongoing, so if there are questions and so on. So that would be part of the membership. I do run a few sort of challenges, as I call them. It's not necessarily like physically difficult. I usually call the challenge even the things that are physically easy, but it's the challenge because you need to allocate the time. You need to commit yourself to actually doing it, to be present there. There's no point in just signing up and be like, oh, I'll just do whenever, because then there won't be any benefit. Like you will not be present there. So this is another way. And then the last way really is about working one-to-one. So this is for those who want a bit of extra attention, or they have like some specific needs that perhaps in the group session it's a little bit difficult to adjust, and that can be, physical or otherwise. And that would be another way to work with. And the way all of this works, really, we have already touched on the basic pillars that I use. So one is movement, which is the asana, the physical practice of it. The other one is breath, and really becoming aware of the breath. A lot of people don't even know or consciously pay attention or realize how they are breathing. And a lot of people are breathing just at the very tops of their lungs. The breath doesn't really travel all the way down fully into the lungs. So it's very shallow breathing, which in itself can cause a lot of anxiety. This is the anxious breath. And I can go into a lot more about the links of breath and emotions. This is actually a two-way street, which is amazing. We can influence that by how we breathe, and the emotions influence our breath as well. And then the last bit, which is sort of encompassing it all, is the awareness itself. And this is linking to awareness of breath, awareness of movement, awareness of your own body, and even learning, not simple, I shouldn't call simple, learning your own position in space. It turns out that currently a lot of people are not really that familiar with one of those aspects of ourselves, of like, where exactly are we? When we raise the hands up, like, are my hands really straight? Are they parallel to each other? Like, where am I? And yoga is really good at that. So really, when you lift the arms and learning where exactly you are sort of positioning yourself in space. So so this is how I work. So it's all about giving people that chance and skill to really learn about themselves, about their bodies, about their minds, about their breath. And that's the journey, really, in a nutshell.
Amazing, really cool. And at the minute, that's all done virtually over Zoom or the platform.
Absolutely. I haven't really seen an in-person, or have had a in-person conversation, I think probably for about a year. Yeah. So yes, all on Zoom, and it works very well. I think some people may have initially some, I don't know, trepidations about using Zoom, but it's surprising how much you can actually transfer over Zoom. And I don't mean just the visual or the sound, you definitely get the energy into people, and people can feel when you are in a group setting as well. You can kind of still feel the group, I don't know how you want to call it, energy or something. I'm not a huge fan about using those words about energy or ooh. I think that's probably what might scare a lot of people from doing yoga or starting it. It's all the other stuff that you then go and think oh, maybe I will need to do this, so it's just about finding just becoming more present, I guess. That's, I think, what I was gonna say.
Love it. So what sort of people do you typically work with in your programs?
Oh, it's all sorts of people, really. A huge chunk, I would say, are professionals in their sort of office jobs. It's so weird to say now, office jobs, because none of them are really in the office. The office jobs that work from home right now. In this, weird world. No, I think it's primarily those people who perhaps are stressed, who are maybe struggling a little bit at the moment with that sort of work-life balance of trying to get to find where they are, and to become a little bit more aligned and aware of how to really sort of function in their lives right now as they are. So I think that would be the huge chunk, but I really don't sort of say to anyone, if anyone's not quite falling into that category, if you are like an entrepreneur or have a, you know, a small business of your own and so on, then of course, by all means, we can definitely work together. There is no like no limit of you can't do yoga because you are this, or this is your job, or anything like that. So it's really for everybody, and this is like one of my sort of personal missions is to spread the, as I said, spread the joy of yoga, but to really make sure that anyone can do it. And it can be intimidating when you Google a photo or of somebody that is incredibly flexible, can pretty much, you know, bend backwards and, you know, fold fold over themselves, and you're not quite fitting that stereotype. So for me, it's really about making sure the essence of the form is still there, but everyone is able to do the forms with their own abilities. So it doesn't have to be like some kind of specific picture.
Nice. So making it accessible for, it sounds like primarily the busy, stressed office workers who probably don't move their body enough and probably need to, I guess, practice their mindfulness and become more present in the moment and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes we forget that yoga sort of trickles into other aspects of life. So you do come up onto the mat, you practice, but the skills you learn, although it may not look like there is any connection whatsoever, but the things that you just reiterated, being more present, being more mindful, that helps with any kind of job. Improves your concentration, it helps you to focus, it helps you realize that actually I'm stressed, or it helps you realize that you were sitting at the computer screen like this, you know, all slouched and your shoulders forwards, like, and then no wonder your back is hurting. It's like, take a breath, you know, open up, expand a little bit, stand up, you know, take like a big stretch. It doesn't have to be like anything big at all, but just simple, small movements to get yourself up a little bit. So
Love it. Love it. So what are some of the key benefits that people find when working with you? You know, if they're, let's say, the average stressed office worker, office said in inverted quotations, working from home, not moving enough, quite stressed. What does that look like after they've been working with you for a period of time? What sort of benefits do they experience?
they are less stressed. I think that's the main and key aspect of the whole sort of working together aspect. So becoming more stressed, it doesn't mean that you will never get stressed in your life. I think that would be quite unrealistic expectation to have. If you're joining with the expectation you will never be stressed, then I'm sorry to break it. It's not going to happen. I don't have like a magic wand that I can wave and there's no stress for anybody. But it's really about then having the tools to deal with the stresses that you are thrown around. So one of the tools and one of the major tools that I use myself personally and my clients learn to use is the breath. So that's number one, and it's so simple, and you can do it anytime. That's the most beautiful thing about it all, is that you can do it anytime. You can sit at your desk, you can do it. You can be on a train or on a plane. Oh my God, I just mentioned a plane. Hasn't happened that in a while as well, but you know, hopefully one day. So yeah, driving somewhere, you can use it anytime at all. So this is like the major thing, and the more you practice and the more you become aware of yourself, your body, your breath, the more sort of tools you accumulate to be able to use. So yeah, becoming less stressed, coming back and realizing how you're feeling and being able to adjust sort of quicker or deal with things in a sort of not a frantic way, but more detached way, but not in a negative sense. It's kind of a little bit, sometimes when people use detached, it's sometimes difficult. I'm not sort of saying don't feel something or don't experience something. Absolutely do that, but don't get stuck in the thought process. Don't sort of iterate through the negative thinking. So that kind of like, that's the detachment that I'm sort of talking about. So it's about having a little bit of a distance between that.
So it sounds in a way like building a resilience to stressful situations by building out, as you say, a toolkit of breathing, you know, these different tools within our toolkit that we can use in various situations to improve your overall kind of resilience to stress and challenging situations. Would you say that's a fair summary?
Yeah, that is a very, very good summary. Yes, I think I actually love that word, resilience. I think this is really an important aspect for all of us, because for me that encompasses what really yoga is all about. It's about being strong and yet flexible. So you kind of have like the strength and the flexibility. And one of the texts themselves really describe that balance between the strength and the flexibility. And for me, it's like almost like a little dance, and you kind of constantly, you know, going perhaps to one side a little bit more than to the other, and it's all intertwined. So for me, yes, the resilience would be exactly there, having almost, I don't know, I'm a little bit tempted to use the word mastering, but I know yoga is really not so much about having these sort of goals or like really orientation into striving and achieving. It's more about letting go and allowing things to happen. It doesn't mean you don't have to have goals. I still do. But it's, again, I guess, having that detached, sort of slightly detached view, not really grasping onto them, but having space, allowing space. Oh, here you go. Breath and space. That's another one of my favorites. So yes, having that space and allowing that to happen without so much of like pushing, so much necessarily doing so much. Yeah,
that makes sense. I think that's a nice way of putting it. What is the sort of most accessible, should we say, step, the lowest barrier step that people can get onto to start their own journey, their own sort of transformation in this space? What would you recommend to get people started?
If they wanted to do on their own, what I think the first step I would recommend actually is breath. I think that would be my first step. It might be a little bit hard for some to do it on their own, but that's, you know, that's where teachers come into play if you're struggling to do it on your own. But really, I think I would recommend starting with the breath, because that's where I believe that's where it all begins. And it's much easier to move with the breath. So I quite often use that expression, moving with the breath. And not all yoga teachers do that. And not all yoga teachers pay that much attention to breath either. So it's also finding what really works for you. And becoming aware of your breath is the key to unlocking everything else, to unlocking the movements themselves and the forms. So take a breath, move into one form, take a breath, move out of the form, for example. This is one of my favorite ways of teaching. Doesn't mean we don't hold forms, we do. They work on different aspects, but in terms of movement and forms, it's definitely interesting to get that with breath and move with breath. So yeah, becoming aware of the breath, simply noticing it is definitely the key.
Interesting. So something you mentioned earlier about how a lot of us, especially those in more stressed situations, are only breathing in this sort of top area, very shallow breath, versus, I guess, lower, more diaphragmatic breath. Is that the right word?
Yes. Yeah.
How can you start to shift from one to the other? Is there like, should you notice your belly coming out more? Like, how does that look, and how can people start to kind of notice that? If they're listening right now, how can they catch their shallow or deep breath?
Well, I mean, we can actually do it right now. It's pretty simple. So whether you are standing or seated, notice how you are sitting or standing. Notice your posture. Notice how it is. And if you are noticing you're sort of slouching a little bit, maybe your shoulders coming forward, bring yourself upright. So without using if you're seated, without using the rest of the chair, of the backrest, just allow some space there, but sitting upright, sitting tall, as if imagining that you had like a string attached to the crown of your head, as if slightly pulling you upwards. So your posture changes that way. You already might feel a little bit more openness in the chest and a little bit more sitting upright. And notice the breath. Notice how it is. Notice whether you're breathing through the nostrils and breathing out through the nostrils, because some people actually breathe through their mouth. So that's another thing. Try to learn to breathe through the nostrils. And then notice where your breath is. Notice where you're sensing your breath. Where do you notice it the most? Your nostrils, your throat, your mouth, maybe your chest, maybe your belly. A lot of us don't breathe into the belly. And you could do that with the eyes closed or open as well, depending on your setting. Some people find it easier to do it with the eyes closed. So when you inhale next time, allow the belly to expand when you inhale and slow your breath down. So when you inhale, the belly expands. And when you exhale, it gently comes inwards, empties. And inhale, the belly expands. And exhale, empties. And just one more inhale. And the exhale. And then come back to your normal breathing. Notice if anything has changed, anything has shifted. Notice how you feel, sort of on the emotional level, or feelings, the sensations, anything changed at all. It doesn't have to be, but this is just the moment and the opportunity to really notice what's there in your own body right now. So this is like one of the simplest practices one can do. So really slowing down the breath. It doesn't have to be very, long, as in your inhale doesn't have to be like, 30 seconds or something crazy. But if you're breathing at like, say for the count of 3, slowing it down to the count of 5, that's a slow down for you. That's already, taking it slower. And trying to get that breath equal for the inhale and the exhale. Unless you are like really stressed, then I would say lengthen the exhale. Make it even longer than the inhale. So that can bring you further sort of into a more relaxed state, into that parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and digest. So that's what you want. You want that relaxed state to be in, and your digestive system can work there and bring you a little bit more calmness into your life. So yeah, how was it for you?
It's super interesting. I want to relate it to something. So for me, that is very similar to some of my experiences with guided meditations. So I'm kind of curious to ask then, where's the line between meditation and yoga? Are they, because that wasn't really yoga, but I guess that process and the skills used to go through that, I imagine there's like massive tie over into yoga, but you're just maybe moving whilst working with your breath. Is that a fair understanding?
It is, and oh, don't get me wrong, there are overlaps. There are overlaps all over. So for me personally, the yoga has to be overlap with mindfulness or with meditation, and there is aspect itself. Actually, generally speaking, yoga forms prepare you for meditation. That's like the aim of so to speak, the aim or the goal of these asanas, that you practice those forms so you can sit and do the meditation. That's your practice. So you prepare your body, you prepare your mind for the meditation. So yoga encompasses all of that. But of course, you can take the mindfulness meditation in itself or some other forms of meditation and just use that on its own. But yoga, with having those three sort of components, the way I see it, which is the movement, which is the breath, and there is the meditation aspect, it sort of like encompasses all of it. So you could treat them individually if you wanted to, and you can go further. There are lots of different exercises as well for the breath that you can do. So we just really did like almost like the first step essentially on focusing on the breath, like how it is, and just slightly slowing it down. But you have lots of various different breathing techniques, equal count, unequal, with holding the breath, without holding the breath. And other aspects, and they will have different benefits or link with different things. So it all relates with that. But for me, personally, I think you do need to have these slower or more quiet times and working with the breath in such a sort of gentle way, in a sense, that you're not really doing that much, in order to be able to transfer that into the yoga practice itself. So what you learn in a sort of this still environment will be helpful when moving in the practice. Because for the vast majority of beginners, when they join the class, to be able to move into the form, move out of the form, focus on their breath, noticing where their legs are, where their arms are, where is the head, where is the rest, where is the rest of the body. It's too much to start with. So you have the quieter spaces to learn and focus just on one thing, nothing else. So you just focus on the breath and you can start to incorporate it. I think a sort of a very nice way of sort of goal or aim would be to do the yoga practice without losing your breath, not even once, regardless of what sort of forms you do. So that's kind of like, I think, would be an achievement in itself. So even if it's a fairly strenuous practice, say you're working on a core a lot, which is one of my favorites to work on, because this is the area which sort of is more for those who need to take a bit more action and to focus, to get a little bit that sort of fire going. And whatever you do, you're breathing in slowly, breathing out slowly, and you just continue the practice just like that. But yeah, definitely loads of overlaps. Not even not even like the slightest doubt about that.
I want to ask, I'm going to go with my favorite question. If you could get the entire world population to do one thing every day, what would it be and why?
Okay, so this is a super question. I love it, but I'm still like sitting on the fence. We talked about the breath so much, so this is like one aspect, and the other aspect is movement. But for me, they are interlinked. If you think about it, the breath itself is movement. You can even sense the air almost going throughout into your lungs and going out. So like the movement itself, you can sense the movement, whether it's your chest or your belly moving when you're breathing, if you're paying attention. So that's why they're kind of linked. But if there was like just absolutely like one thing, I'm still gonna link it to breath though. If there was just one thing that I would tell everyone to do, is walk. As much as you can, walk. This is one thing I seriously, and pay attention to your breath while you're doing it. So here you go. I still got back to breath. So as I said, it's like two things, but they're just so, in my view, interlinked and intertwined that you just can't have one without the other.
So walk whilst focusing on your breath.
Yeah.
So managed to sneak two in there very nicely. Cool. How do you approach that? So some people, love to aim for 10,000 steps. Some people, I think their benefit is just whenever you can. If you have 5 minutes, go for 5 minutes. If you have 20 minutes, go for 20 minutes. Any thoughts or sort of advice around that? How to put it into practice?
I think it's really individual. I mean, I love to go for like longer walks when I can, but I am also incredibly realistic that it may not happen every single day. It might be really hard to be able to include, I don't know, say an hour, 2 hours of walking in one day for you. So it might be difficult. So my approach would be do as much walking as you can, so when you remember, and incorporate simple things. There are a lot of things we can probably replace, say a car journey or a train journey with walking. And sometimes you might be surprised that one might be quicker than the other. If you get stuck in traffic a lot, for example, you might be surprised, or you need to like go round and round, like very weird sort of route, that maybe walking might be even faster, or even if it's not like faster, it's just a little bit of extra with not too much interruption to your day. Say your journey somehow takes 20 minutes and the walk takes 30 minutes. I think take it if you can. I mean, if it's not raining outside, that might discourage many of us, of getting outside. But really just incorporating the little things and incorporating whenever you can. Another good way of incorporating, I wouldn't call it steps, but just incorporating a little bit of movement, is walking on the spot. You are sitting with quotes in a meeting, for example, where it's not necessarily on camera. You could be standing and walking, on the spot here, and taking 5-10 minutes. Even that alone can shift how you're feeling, and perhaps even motivate you to do a bit more. Maybe you can then go like, oh, actually, after this meeting, I do have like 10 minutes. I'll go outside and I'm going to take that walk. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Brilliant. I was in between watching, this is really bad, Netflix and Amazon Prime. Or was it Disney Plus? I can't remember. Last night we were flicking between, we watched one series and then I wanted to watch Star Wars and then we finished with another series. And between those, I think whilst the kettle was boiling, I was making myself a cup of tea about 9:30. I just did some like star jumps and running on the spot, just because I felt like I've been sat down for a little while. I was like, I'm just waiting for the kettle to boil, and I just feel a bit kind of sluggish and a bit like I've been sat down for too long. So I just, yeah, you don't have to get outside. It can just be on the spot. Love that.
That is a brilliant example. I mean, waiting for the kettle to boil, this is like the number one. This could even be like a little trigger or a little nudge that you use to do something. So even simple things like working on your balance, standing in a tree pose, while waiting for the kettle to boil. I mean, these are like perfect opportunities to do something. Or you could move, you don't have to be still. But balance is another thing that quite a few people actually struggle. Even as simple things as standing on one leg can be challenging for this. But the good news is it's learnable. Is that a word? It's probably not a word. It definitely is easy to learn to do that, and it doesn't take ages. It usually takes a few weeks, even for those who couldn't lift their toe off the floor. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Love it. Make use of those little 2-minute little boiling microwave going 2 minutes before Zoom meeting. Yeah, lots of opportunities. Awesome. We are coming up on time, but I want to ask, is there one common myth that you would like to bust for me and the listeners before we wrap things up today?
I think I'm gonna bust the one that I also used to have and I used to believe. You have to be flexible to do yoga. That was my number one belief that I held for years and years, for those 7 years that I said no to yoga, because I was incredibly inflexible. I couldn't touch my toes when I started, and that's when when I was like 16 at school, I couldn't touch my toes either. So that's how like inflexible I was even when I was like super young. But the truth is that there are so many things you can do, and at the same time, learn to become more flexible while you're doing it. That there's just like no way. Like if this is what's stopping you, please just try. Seriously, there are many. I don't like calling them modifications that you can do. I would say variations. Here you go. I think this is so much nicer. There are just so many variations you can do while practicing yoga. That is just really not an excuse at all to not try.
Brilliant. Love it. I think that has stopped me in the past. And when I've done yoga, I'm not very flexible because I've had a history of weightlifting. Weightlifting tends to make you very how should you say, fixed in certain movements, if that makes sense, and lacking flexibility in changing between those movements. So yes, when I've done some yoga, I've been the guy in the room, the limited number of classes I've been to, who's really struggling to do the simple things. However, I was able to make progress, and that's, it felt great, and I felt better for it. So I think that's wherever you are, you can make progress. If you're not flexible, don't let it stop you from moving forward. Brilliant. Right, just before we wrap things up, Aiste, would you like to share where the listeners can find you, where they can see more of your content?
Yep, absolutely. So I'm most active on LinkedIn, and it's really just by finding Aiste Kalinauskaite through my name or through my Footprint Yoga, so my sort of company's website, as well on LinkedIn. So that's like the easiest way. I do use Facebook, but it's a little bit harder to find me there. I'm sure Alex can link it up as well.
Yeah, I'll share the links with the episodes. When I share it on LinkedIn, of course, I'll tag you. That will make it nice and simple. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Perfect.